Welcome to the Phrasal Verbs with Cut podcast. I'm Tom, and I'm one of the teachers here at Intrepid English. Before we begin, there's some vocabulary we need to go through. Simultaneously, adverb, at the same time. Reduce, verb, make smaller or less in amount, degree, or size. Intake, noun, an amount of food, air, or another substance taken into the body. Exclude, verb, deny someone access to a place, group, or privilege. So, a phrasal verb consists of a root verb, such as go, put, or set, and an adverb or preposition such as away, on, or out. Phrasal verbs are idiomatic, which means that the phrasal verb has a different meaning to the individual words within the phrase. This blog explains the meaning of 8 common phrasal verbs which contain the verb cut. The first is cut across. There are 3 different meanings to cut across. The first is to go across an area of land to save time. For example, I cut across the field because I was running late. The second is to pass through or access something. For example, a bridge cut across the track a few meters ahead. The third is to affect 2 or more groups simultaneously. For example, these arguments cut across class boundaries. The second is cut back. There are 3 meanings to the phrasal verb cut back. The first is to reduce the amount of money that you spend. For example, we need to cut back on our spending. The second is to stop doing or using less of something. For example, I smoke, but I'm trying to cut back. The third is to remove parts of a plant or tree to reduce its size. Another word for this is pruning. The example sentence here is, I had to cut back several branches that were blocking the path. Our third phrasal verb that uses the verb cut is cut down. There are 5 meanings to the phrasal verb cut down. The first is to reduce the amount of something. For example, the new windows should help cut down on the traffic noise. The second is to start eating, drinking, or smoking less of something. For example, you need to cut down your alcohol intake and exercise more. The third is to make a piece of writing shorter. For example, this piece of work needs to be cut down by 100 words. The fourth is to cut through the main part of a tree. For example, we've tried to stop them from cutting down the rainforest. And the last meaning, which is a literal meaning, is when a weapon, usually a sword, cuts them down and kills them. For example, hundreds of men were cut down on the battlefield. Our fourth phrasal verb is cut in, and there are 4 meanings to this. The first is to interrupt someone who is speaking. For example, Paul cut in with the occasional sarcastic reply. The second is to drive past a vehicle and move quickly in front of them. For example, the red Mini cut in front of me. The next meaning is when a piece of equipment starts working automatically. For example, the air conditioning cuts in when the temperature goes above 20. And the fourth meaning is to allow someone to have part of the profits of something. For example, they let me cut in on the deal. Our next phrasal verb is cut into. There are 2 meanings to this phrasal verb. The first is to reduce the amount of something. For example, the long days really cut into my home time. The second is to interrupt an activity or process. For example, a loud bang on the door cut into his thoughts. Our next phrasal verb is cut off. Now, there are 8 meanings to this phrasal verb. The first is to remove something by cutting it. For example, I decided to cut off my hair. The second is to stop providing a supply of something. For example, our food supply has been cut off. The third is to stop something from going somewhere. For example, the police cut off their track. The fourth is to make a place difficult or impossible to enter. For example, the town was completely cut off for 4 days. The fifth is to prevent someone from leaving a place. For example, he was secluded and cut off from the outside world. The next meaning is to prevent someone from continuing what they're saying. For example, she cut him off as he spoke. The next meaning is to refuse to allow someone to get your money. For example, her father cut her off before he died. And the final meaning is to stop having a close friendship or relationship with someone. For example, everyone in the village cut off the old man in the yellow house. Here's a bonus fact for you. If you're in a bar and you've drank too much, the bartender can refuse to serve you, thereby cutting you off. For example, you've had too much to drink. I have to cut you off. Our seventh phrasal verb that uses the verb cut is cut out. Now there are 9 meanings to the phrasal verb cut out. You may want to get a piece of paper and a pen just to jot down these meanings. The first is to remove something from a larger piece of something. For example, I cut out this newspaper article for you. Next is to make something by cutting it from something else. For example, he cut out several star shapes and glued them onto the costume. Next is to remove parts from something such as a piece of writing. For example, they've cut out 6 scenes from my script. Next is to stop eating or doing something, usually for health reasons. For example, I've cut out sugar from my diet. Next is to stop doing something that someone finds annoying. For example, you're chewing too loud, cut it out. Next is to stop something such as noise or light. For example, the thick curtains cut out most of the light from the street. Next is to exclude someone. For example, I'm not trying to cut you out, but. The next meaning is when an engine or machine fails. For example, the car cut out. And finally, the last meaning is to suddenly leave a line of traffic and join another one. For example, the car suddenly cut out in front of us. Our final phrasal verb is cut through. There are 2 meanings to the phrasal verb cut through. The first is to go through an area rather than go around it. For example, he decided to cut through the forest. The last meaning is to move quickly and smoothly through something. For example, Germany cut through the Spanish defense and scored a try. Now, there are a lot of phrasal verbs here. I would recommend copying these down to embed your knowledge. I would also recommend writing your own sentences using the phrasal verbs discussed. I'd like to thank you all for listening to this podcast, and I hope that the phrasal verbs will be of use. If you have any questions or would like to request a topic for a future blog, you can contact us through email, you can add a comment to the podcast, or you can book a free trial lesson with one of our teachers. I'm Tom, one of the teachers here at Intrepid English, and thank you for listening.